Today, Rand Paul said something so honest, so accurate, that he is certain to be crushed by his fellow Republicans for having dared to utter it in the first place. It has to do with the creation of ISIS. Listen to Rand here.
Lindsey Graham would say ISIS exists because of people like Rand Paul, who said, let's not go into Syria. And what do you say to Lindsey?
I would say it's exactly the opposite. ISIS exists and grew stronger because of the hawks in our party who gave arms indiscriminately, and most of those arms were snatched up by ISIS. These hawks also wanted to bomb Assad, which would have made ISIS's job even easier. They created these people. ISIS is all over Libya because these same hawks in my party loved Hillary Clinton's war in Libya. They just wanted more of it. But Libya is a failed state, and it's a disaster. Iraq really is a failed state, or a vassal state now of Iran. So everything that they've talked about in foreign policy, they've been wrong about for 20 years, and yet they have somehow the gall to keep saying and pointing fingers otherwise.
Wow.
Wow. I did not expect that when I woke up this morning.
Neither did I. It's comments like that that remind me that Rand Paul does have libertarian tendencies, and then he'll get into these ridiculous conservative arguments against reproductive rights and things like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're a terrible person. But his stance on foreign policy is appealing. I like it. I like what he said there, and also when he was talking about how close we came to bombing Syria over their use of chemical weapons, I remembered how insane it was that Russia is the country that kind of brokered the deal between the United States and Assad. So we wouldn't actually do any type of military intervention in that case. That blows my mind, considering the tension between Russia and America now. But nonetheless, what he's saying there is right. I mean, we have always had foreign policy, or I shouldn't say always, but certainly in the last few decades, have pushed for foreign policy that actually strengthened terrorism in the Middle East. And there are very, very respectable journalists like Glenn Greenwald who will make the argument that a lot of these actions are done on purpose because it leads to a perpetual state of war, which makes a lot of people, private contractors and weapons manufacturers, very wealthy. Yeah. Right? We have a vested interest in continuing with these wars. So maybe some of this stuff is done on purpose, but I love that Rand Paul spoke out against it.
Yeah, and it can make politicians wealthy, the ones who push for war for the defense contractors and then go and get multi-million-dollar lobbying jobs. They can actually personally make out very well based on that. He definitely deserves a lot of credit for an accurate understanding of what led to the creation of ISIS and other groups like ISIS. ISIS obviously gets they get all the press coverage, but there are tons of other groups rampaging around North Africa, Central Africa, Syria, and Iraq as well, that would look very similar to ISIS if they did not have a flag in their hands at the time. But he understands that it was created because of the chaos that we unleashed on the Middle East when we invaded, particularly Iraq, and some of the policies we've had for Syria as well. And he's wise to bring up Libya too. Now, I don't actually like his foreign policy in general. I think that here his desire to take America away from the concerns of the rest of the world and not be interventionist in that sense, I think it makes sense here. But I also think that he would want to cut off much of our foreign aid to humanitarian efforts, and sometimes legitimately the American military should go abroad, either to help with Ebola, for instance, or in some cases even militarily. And I think that he would probably blanket be against those two.
Yeah, he would, and I wouldn't approve of that either. Although I would argue that we have some humanitarian spending on countries that don't necessally need it. I'm not
or deserve it.
Or deserve it, exactly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, but I will say that the interventionist thought process is something that I absolutely love. And I don't think that we genuinely invade countries in the Middle East because we want to intervene and protect people. I think we do it because we have an interest, a vested interest in doing it. And so, you know, when people make these arguments about like, oh, well, we're fighting for women's rights and all those poor children that are victims of terrorism. I mean, how many different countries deal with, you know, gender inequality, terrorism, all these horrible things, and we have no interest in invading those countries or getting involved because we don't have anything to gain from it. So everything we do, even when it comes to foreign aid, is usually done because there's someone who's profiting from it or there's some sort of, you know, benefit that we're going to get out of it.
Yeah, if we were actually fighting for women's rights, we suck at it. We're really, really bad at it, and I don't think it's happening anyway. I'm pretty sure we're fighting for freedom. To give them freedom. But anyway, but back to the Rand Paul saying this thing, like we're going to have criticism immediately in just a second, But if you're a Republican running for the presidency, I don't see how you can possibly say this. I mean, he could even have said that hawks have created ISIS, but he repeatedly said hawks in my party, hawks in our party. And that is totally true, and certainly it'll be better received now than it would have 2 years ago, especially 10 years ago. But still, many Republicans are not going to be willing to sit there and listen to him say that they were obviously responsible for the growth of terrorism throughout that region and throughout the world. It's super true and thus super dangerous to push as a presidential candidate.
I think it is risky, but maybe this is his effort in reaching out to independent voters.
Maybe.
Because the reality is a lot of the ultra-conservative voters here in the United States watch media outlets like Fox News, which are constantly fear-mongering about terrorist groups like ISIS.
Yeah.
And so these are individuals who are very much concerned about national security. They think that terrorists in the Middle East are an imminent threat to Americans right now, and we need to do something. We need to bomb, drone strikes, whatever it takes. And so right now, what he's saying doesn't appeal to those voters at all. If anything, you know, I think that conservative Republicans, the right-wingers, could take his statements and paint him as someone who's weak on national security.
I think they're going to use that clip,
They're
I think,
absolutely,
in all of their ads.
I think they're absolutely going to do it. But who knows? Maybe this is a risky way of him trying to reach out to independent voters who don't have these right-wing thoughts on foreign policy.
It could be. It could be. Unfortunately, those who do have the right-wing thoughts, like Bobby Jindal, immediately attacked him for it. This we're providing not because Bobby Jindal really matters in any significant way, but it is a taste of the sorts of attacks that already, I'm sure, are being blasted out to people w'ho've subscribed to Mike Huckabee's campaign newsletter and all of that. And you're going to see it on Fox News throughout the rest of this week. Bobby Jindal, though, says, "This is a perfect example of why Senator Paul is unsuited to be commander-in-chief. We have men and women in the military who are in the field trying to fight ISIS right now, and Senator Paul is taking the weakest, most liberal Democrat position."
Okay, stop right there. Does Jindal have any awareness about Obama's foreign policy over the last 6 years, 7 years? Obama has not only continued Bush's foreign policy, he's expanded it,
In some
right?
ways, yeah.
So to make this argument that, oh, these Democrats, first of all, I don't think it's weak if you don't want to get involved in, you know, issues abroad. But to make it seem as though Republicans are the ones that are strong and Democrats are so different in their policy is absolutely ridiculous. Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to foreign policy, at least when concerning Obama, exactly the same.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same.
Yeah. He goes on to say, "It's one thing for Senator Paul to take an outlandish position as a senator at Washington cocktail parties, but being commander-in-chief is an entirely different job. We should all be clear that evil and radical Islam are at fault for the rise of ISIS." I think we should invade evil then, actually. And people like President Obama and Hillary Clinton exacerbate it. Bobby Jindal is a nothing candidate. He is not a human being. He has no thoughts of his own. It's literally Mad Libs. It's, he goes to cocktail parties. He's an insider. I'm not an insider. It's not us that's responsible. It's Hillary. Insert leading frontrunner candidate and current Democratic president.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now put a funny adverb. You're not an actual human. That's why you're never going to connect with anyone.
And
it's so frustrating to even have to listen to him.
That's absolutely true. And also, I want to know what Bobby Jindal's proposal is for fighting terrorism abroad. Is it more of the same shit? And if it is more of the same shit, how is it different from the Obama administration?
Yeah.
Like, how would you be tougher on national security than the Obama administration?
Yeah.
Do you want to arm more people in the Middle East? Do you
Yeah.
want to bomb more countries? Do you want to do more signature strikes? Do you want to spy on more Americans? I just don't understand it.